Commander Lyra Vance stood in chains before the Council of the Galactic Concord. The great chamber was cold, built from black stone that absorbed all warmth and hope. Around her sat the representatives of 12 alien species, their eyes filled with judgment and disgust. She was the only human in the room, and she had never felt more alone. Admiral Kethforn rose from his seat. His body was made of living crystal, and light passed through him in strange patterns. He had no mouth, but his voice echoed directly into the minds of everyone present. His words were sharp like broken glass. "Commander Lyra Vance," he announced, "you stand accused of treason against the Galactic Concord. You violated direct orders. You endangered your crew. You showed mercy to enemies of the Alliance." Lyra lifted her chin and met his gaze without fear. "I saved 3,000 innocent lives. The Drethki were not soldiers. They were families, children. They posed no threat to anyone." A murmur passed through the chamber. The Drethki were a species marked for death. The Concord had decided they were too dangerous to exist, and their entire civilization was being erased from the stars. Lyra had found a colony ship fleeing the destruction. Her orders were to destroy it. Instead, she had hidden them on a remote moon and erased all records of their location. "The Drethki are designated hostile," Kethforn said. "Their elimination was approved by this council. You do not have the authority to question our decisions." "I have the authority of my own conscience," Lyra replied. "I will not murder children because a committee told me to." The chamber erupted in angry voices. Several delegates called for her immediate execution. Others wanted her imprisoned for life. But Kethforn raised his crystalline hand, and silence fell like a hammer. "We have decided on a punishment that fits your crime," he said. There was something cold and satisfied in his telepathic voice. "You showed mercy to monsters. Now you will be given to monsters in return." A holographic image appeared in the center of the chamber. It showed a planet wrapped in red clouds and volcanic fire. Lightning storms danced across its surface. Even from orbit, it looked like hell itself. "Charybdis, Kethforn continued. "The Wyvern Abyss, home to the Draconith, the most savage predators in known space. Every expedition to this world has ended in death. Every military force we have sent has been torn apart. For 10,000 years, we have used this planet for one purpose only: to dispose of those who deserve no quick death." Lyra felt her blood run cold, but she refused to show fear. She had heard stories about the Wyvern Abyss. Soldiers whispered about it in dark corners, telling tales of massive creatures that could tear starships from the sky. No one who entered the planet's atmosphere had ever returned. "You will be dropped into the abyss," Kethforn said. "Alone, without weapons, without supplies. The Draconith will find you, and they will do what they do to all intruders. Your death will be broadcast to the fleet as a reminder of what happens to those who defy the Concord." Guards grabbed Lyra's arms and began to drag her from the chamber. She did not struggle. There was no point. But as she passed the rows of alien faces, she noticed something that gave her a small spark of hope. Not all of them looked pleased. Some looked away in shame. Others watched her with something that might have been respect. The guards took her through cold corridors to a launch bay where a small drop pod waited. It was barely larger than a coffin, designed for one purpose: to deliver its passenger to the surface of a hostile world and nothing more. There would be no return journey. There would be no rescue. As they forced her into the pod, Lyra saw a group of humans standing behind a security barrier. Her crew. They had come to say goodbye, and many of them were crying. Lieutenant Chun, her first officer, pressed against the barrier with desperation in her eyes. "Commander, please," Chun called out. "Let us come with you. We can fight together." Lyra shook her head slowly. "No, you need to survive. You need to tell people what happened here. Tell them that humanity does not abandon its conscience, even when it costs everything." "This is not right," Chun said, her voice breaking. "You saved lives. You did the right thing." "The right thing is rarely the easy thing," Lyra replied. She managed to smile despite everything. "Do not mourn for me, Lieutenant. Humans are harder to kill than they think. We have survived ice ages, plagues, and wars. We have climbed out of every grave they ever dug for us. Watch the skies. You might be surprised." The guards sealed the pod, and Lyra was plunged into darkness. She heard the engines ignite, felt the terrible force of acceleration pressing her into the hard metal seat. Through a tiny window, she watched the stars blur and stretch as the pod shot toward the burning planet below. The entry into atmosphere was violent. The pod shook and screamed as it tore through layers of toxic cloud. Fire wrapped around the tiny vessel, and Lyra gritted her teeth against the heat. Alarms blared warnings she could not understand. Systems failed one after another. Then came the impact. The pod struck the ground with enough force to shatter bones, but the crash foam deployed just in time. Lyra was thrown against her restraints, her vision going white with pain. For a long moment, she could not move, could not think, could only exist in a world of hurt and noise. When she finally opened her eyes, she was looking up at a sky the color of blood. Red clouds churned overhead, lit by flashes of lightning that seemed to go on forever. The air was thick and hot, filled with ash and the smell of sulfur. She could hear distant roars echoing across the landscape, sounds that made her primitive human brain scream warnings of predators and death. Lyra forced herself to move. She unbuckled her restraints with shaking hands and crawled out of the ruined pod. The ground beneath her was black volcanic rock, sharp enough to cut through her uniform. In every direction, she saw nothing but desolation, mountains of ash, rivers of cooling lava, and a darkness that seemed to swallow all light. She was alone on a world of monsters, with no weapons, no shelter, and no hope of rescue. But she was alive. And humans, as she had told her crew, were very hard to kill. Lyra stood on shaking legs and looked out at the hellscape that was now her home. Somewhere in the distance, something screamed. It was a sound of hunger and rage, the cry of a predator that had caught the scent of prey. She took a deep breath of the burning air and began to walk. She did not know where she was going. She did not know how she would survive. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She would not die on her knees. Whatever monsters waited in the darkness, they would find that this human was not easy meat. The Wyvern abyss had swallowed countless victims over the centuries. It had never swallowed anyone like Lyra Vance. Lyra survived the first night by hiding in a cave carved into the base of an obsidian cliff. The cave was small and filled with sharp rocks, but it protected her from the acid rain that fell from the red sky. She pressed herself against the cold stone wall and listened to the sounds of the alien world outside. The roars came closer as darkness fell. She could hear massive wings beating against the storm winds. She could hear claws scraping against rock. The Draconith were hunting, and she knew they were hunting for her. When morning came, Lyra crawled out of her hiding place and took stock of her situation. The emergency kit from her pod had survived the crash. Inside, she found a small knife, 3 days of food bars, a water filter, and a medical kit. It was not much. It would not be enough. She began to explore her surroundings, moving carefully from rock to rock, always watching the sky. The landscape was harsh, but not entirely lifeless. Strange plants grew in the cracks of the volcanic stone, their leaves thick and waxy to protect them from the toxic air. Small creatures scurried away from her footsteps, 6-legged things with hard shells and too many eyes. On the second day, she found water. A stream of clear liquid flowed from a crack in the mountainside, cool and clean despite the hellish environment. She filled her canteen and drank deeply, grateful beyond words for this small mercy dot. It was while she was drinking that she felt the shadow fall over her. Lyra looked up slowly, her heart pounding in her chest. Above her, perched on a boulder the size of a building, was the largest creature she had ever seen. It was a dragon in every sense of the word. Its body was covered in scales that shifted between black and deep purple. Its wings were folded against its sides like great sails of leather and bone. Its head was longer than she was tall, filled with teeth that could crush starship armor, but it was the eyes that stopped her breath. They were amber, flecked with gold, and they burned with unmistakable intelligence. This was not a mindless beast. This creature was thinking. This creature was watching. This creature was deciding what she was. Lyra did not run. There was no point. The dragon could catch her before she took 3 steps. Instead, she slowly rose to her feet and faced the monster without flinching. If she was going to die, she would die standing. The dragon tilted its head, studying her with those ancient eyes. A low rumble came from its throat, deep enough to shake the ground beneath her feet. Then it did something she did not expect, that it waited minutes past. The dragon did not attack. It simply watched her, as if waiting to see what she would do. Lyra's mind raced through possibilities. Every story she had heard about the Draconeth described them as savage killers. But this creature was not attacking. Why? Slowly, carefully, Lyra raised her hand. She held it out toward the dragon, palm open, showing that she held no weapon and meant no threat. It was a gesture of peace, used by humans for thousands of years to greet strangers. "Hello," she said softly. Her voice was hoarse from the dry air. "I am not here to hurt you. I did not choose to come here. I was thrown away by my own people." The dragon's nostrils flared. It leaned closer, its massive head moving toward her outstretched hand. Lyra felt her arm tremble, but held it steady. She could feel the heat of the creature's breath washing over her skin. Then, from behind her, she heard the screech of attacking wings. 3 smaller dragons dove from the clouds, their mouths open, their claws extended. They were young, she realized, young hunters looking for easy prey. They would tear her apart in seconds, but they never reached her. The great dragon moved faster than anything so large should be able to move. It launched itself from the boulder and met the attackers in midair. There was a terrible clash of scales and claws. One of the young dragons was thrown into a cliff face with enough force to crack stone. The other 2 retreated, screaming in rage and fear. The great dragon landed between Lyra and the attackers, spreading its wings wide in a gesture of protection. The young ones circled for a moment, then fled into the clouds. They did not return. Lyra stared at the creature that had saved her life. Her legs felt weak. Her mind struggled to understand what had just happened. This dragon, this apex predator of a death world, had protected her. Why? The great dragon turned back to face her. Again came that rumbling sound, but this time it felt different, warmer, almost gentle. The creature lowered its head until its snout was level with her face, and Lyra understood that it was waiting again. She did not know why she trusted it. Every survival instinct screamed at her to run, to hide, to fight. But deeper than instinct, deeper than fear, she felt something else. Connection, recognition, the sense of meeting someone important for the first time. Lyra reached out and pressed her palm against the dragon's snout. Its scales were warm and smooth, like some heated stone. She felt a vibration pass through its body, and suddenly images flooded her mind. She saw the planet from above, beautiful instead of terrifying. She saw caves filled with crystals that sang with light. She saw young dragons learning to fly, watched over by elders who guided them with patience and care. She saw a civilization hiding in plain sight, choosing to be seen as monsters rather than face the cruelty of the stars. The Draconis were not beasts. They were the Keldron, and they had been watching the galaxy for longer than any other species had existed. Lyra gasped as the vision faded. She looked into those amber eyes and saw something she had never expected to find in this place of exile. She saw a friend. "You understand me," she whispered. "You understand everything." The dragon rumbled again, and this time Lyra knew it was agreement. The Keldron had watched the Concord dump prisoners onto their world for 10,000 years. They had seen every species, every criminal, every political exile, and they had judged them all unworthy of contact. Until now. "What makes me different?" Lyra asked. The answer came as another flood of images. She saw herself as the dragon saw her, standing without fear, offering peace instead of violence, accepting death with dignity. She saw images of the others who had come before, screaming, fighting, trying to kill, begging for mercy. None of them had ever just said hello. None of them had ever treated the Keldron like equals. The great dragon rose to its full height and spread its wings toward the horizon. An invitation. A choice. Lyra looked at the burning landscape around her, then back at the creature who had offered her something impossible. Not just survival, but belonging. She began to walk, and the dragon walked beside her. For the first time since she had been thrown into the abyss, Lyra Vance smiled. The great dragon was called Veilfrix, and she was the matriarch of her people. In the language of the Keldron, her name meant she who guards the first flame. She had lived for 3,000 years and had watched empires rise and fall among the stars. Lyra learned these things slowly, through shared visions and careful understanding. The Keldron did not speak with words. They communicated through thoughts and images, pressing their minds together like hands touching in greeting. It took weeks for Lyra to understand even simple ideas, but she was patient, and Veilfrix was a good teacher. The matriarch brought Lyra to her people's home. It was hidden beneath the volcanic mountains, in caves so vast that entire cities could fit inside them. Crystals grew from the walls and ceiling, glowing with soft light in every color imaginable. Waterfalls of molten rock flowed through channels carved by ancient claws. Thousands of Keldron lived here, from massive elders to tiny hatchlings no bigger than dogs. When Lyra walked into the great cavern, silence fell. Every eye turned to look at her. She was small, soft, fragile. She was an outsider. She was everything they had spent 10,000 years avoiding. But Veilfrix walked beside her, and that meant something. The elders gathered in a circle to discuss the strange visitor. Lyra could feel their thoughts washing over her, too fast and complex to follow. Some were curious. Some were hostile. Some were afraid. What did it mean that the matriarch had chosen to protect this creature? What did it mean for their long isolation? After hours of debate, a decision was reached. Lyra would be allowed to stay, but only if she proved herself worthy. She would face 3 trials. If she passed, she would be accepted. If she failed, she would be cast out to die in the wastelands. The first trial was the climb far from the hidden city. There was a mountain called the Spire of Ashes. It rose so high that its peak disappeared into the red clouds. No human could survive the climb. The air was too thin, the rocks too sharp, the winds too strong. But Lyra had no choice. She began the climb at dawn and did not stop until long after dark. Her hands bled from gripping the rough stone. Her lungs burned from the thin air. Several times she slipped and nearly fell to her death. But she kept going, one handhold at a time, one step after another. The Keldron watched from the sky. They did not help her. They simply watched, waiting to see what this small creature would do when faced with the impossible. Lyra reached the top as the sun rose on the second day. She collapsed on the peak, unable to move, barely able to breathe. But she was there. She had done what they said could not be done. When she looked up, Valthrix was waiting for her. The second trial was the hunt. The Keldron hunted great beasts that lived in the lava fields. These creatures were fast and strong, with armor-like skin and horns that could pierce stone. A single Keldron could bring one down with tooth and claw. Lyra had nothing but her small knife and her human wits. She hunted for 3 days. She could not outrun the beast or overpower it. So she used her mind instead. She found a narrow canyon where the creature could not use its size to advantage. She dug a pit and covered it with thin stone. She waited until the beast charged at her, then dove aside as it fell into her trap. The Keldron were impressed. They had expected her to fail. They had expected her to try to fight like one of them and die for her foolishness. Instead, she had fought like a human, using cleverness and patience instead of strength. The third trial was the speaking. Lyra was brought before the Council of Elders, the 12 oldest and wisest of the Keldron. They demanded to know who she was. Not her name or her rank, but her true self. Why had she been cast into the abyss? What had she done to deserve this fate? And most importantly, what did she want from them? Lyra closed her eyes and opened her mind. She showed them everything. She showed them Earth, the blue world, where humanity had been born. She showed them the first time humans looked up at the stars and dreamed of touching them. She showed them the long journey from caves to cities to spacecraft, the endless drive to explore, to discover, to reach beyond what was known. She showed them humanity's darkness too, the wars that had killed millions, the cruelty that one human could show another, the capacity for hatred and destruction that lived in every heart. And she showed them why she had been condemned. The refugee ship full of innocent people, the orders to kill, her choice to refuse. "We are not perfect," Lyra said through the connection. "We have done terrible things. We have hurt each other and destroyed what we should have protected. But we keep trying to be better. Every generation, we try again. We fall down and we get back up. We make mistakes and we learn from them. That is what makes us human." She opened her eyes and looked at the ancient faces surrounding her. "You asked what I want from you. I do not want your weapons or your knowledge or your power. I just want to not be alone. I want to belong somewhere. I want to prove that even when my own people threw me away, I was still worth something." Silence filled the great cavern. The elders looked at each other, sharing thoughts that Lyra could not hear. Then, one by one, they bowed their heads. She had passed. Valthrix approached and pressed her forehead against Lyra's. A vision filled her mind, clearer and more powerful than any before. She saw herself standing among the Keldron, not as a guest or a prisoner, but as one of them. She saw scales of starfire covering her human skin, armor forged in dragon flame. She saw herself leading them out of the shadows and into the light. "You have proven yourself worthy," Valthrix said through the bond. "You have climbed our mountains, hunted our prey, and opened your heart without fear. The Keldron have hidden from the galaxy for 10,000 years, waiting for one who is worthy to know us." The matriarch rose to her full height, spreading wings that seemed to fill the entire cavern. "We have waited long enough. It is time for the galaxy to remember that dragons are real." She looked down at Lyra, and her amber eyes burned with ancient fire. "And you, little human, will be our voice. You will be our bridge to the stars. You will be our queen." Lyra felt tears streaming down her face. She had been thrown into this abyss as punishment. She had been meant to die alone and forgotten. Instead, she had found a family. And together, they would show the galaxy what it meant to underestimate humanity. 18 months passed on the world, the Concord called the Wyvern Abyss. Lyra learned to fly on dragon back. She learned to speak through thought instead of words. She learned the history of the Keldron, a history so long that it made the Galactic Concord look like children playing at Empire. 10,000 years ago, the Keldron had sailed between stars. They had built wonders that modern civilizations could not imagine. And then they had looked at the younger races, seen their cruelty and greed, and chosen to walk away. Better to be feared as monsters, they decided, than to be conquered as rivals. But Lyra changed things. Her presence among them awakened something that had slept for millennia. Hope. The hope that perhaps the galaxy had produced something new. Perhaps these humans, these strange, soft creatures who refused to die when they should, were different from the others. On the day the Concord returned, Lyra was standing on a cliff overlooking the volcanic plains. She wore armor now, forged from volcanic glass and Keldron scales, black as night and stronger than any metal the Concord possessed. Her hair had grown long, and she had braided it in the style of the dragon riders from old Earth legends. She looked like a warrior queen from ancient myths. Valthrix landed beside her, and together they watched the sky burn with new stars, ships, dozens of them. The symbols on their hulls belonged to the Galactic Concord. "They have come back," Lyra said through their bond. "Why?" Valthrix's thoughts were dark with old anger. "They come to take what is ours. They have developed new weapons, new machines. They think they can finally kill us and claim our world for its resources." Lyra felt cold fury building in her chest. The Concord had thrown her into this abyss to die. Now they came to destroy the only people who had ever truly accepted her. "What do we do?" she asked. The matriarch's mental voice was calm as stone. "For 10,000 years, we have hidden. We let them think we were beasts. We let them believe their own stories. But you have shown us that not all starfarers are the same. You have reminded us who we once were." Valthrix spread her wings, and her scales began to glow with inner fire. "It is time to remind the galaxy as well." The call went out through the mountains, from cavern to cavern, from nest to nest. The Keldron had lived in peace for 10,000 years, but they had never forgotten how to make war. Dragons emerged from every shadow, their scales gleaming, their eyes burning. Young and old, great and small, they rose into the red sky. 10,000. Dragons. An army that had not flown together since before the Concord existed. Admiral Kethvorn stood on the bridge of the Eternal Mandate and watched his fleet take position around the planet. His crystalline face showed no emotion, but inside he felt satisfaction. The Draconith had been a mark of shame on the Concord's record for too long. Today, that shame would be erased. "Begin orbital bombardment," he ordered. "Burn everything." The weapons officers hesitated. "Admiral, our sensors are showing movement in the atmosphere." "Large movement." "The beasts are gathering," Kethvorn said dismissively. "Good. It will save us the trouble of hunting them down. Fire." The first shots never reached the ground. From the clouds below, dragons rose like a wall of living fire. They moved in perfect formation, their scales creating a barrier that deflected the energy weapons harmlessly into space. Before the fleet could react, the Keldron were among them. Kethvorn watched in disbelief as creatures that should have been mindless animals tore through his warships with surgical precision. They did not destroy blindly. They targeted weapon systems and engines, leaving the ships disabled but intact. They knocked out shields with coordinated strikes that spoke of centuries of tactical experience. This was not the behavior of beasts. This was war as fought by masters. A transmission cut through all frequencies, overriding the fleet's communications. A human voice spoke, and Kethvorn felt his crystalline blood run cold. "Admiral Kethvorn, this is Commander Lyra Vance. I believe you remember me." The bridge's main screen flickered, and an image appeared. It was Lyra, but not the Lyra he had condemned to death. This woman was dressed in dragon-scale armor. Her eyes held fire that had not been there before. She sat astride the largest dragon Kefvaran had ever seen, and behind her flew an army that should not exist. "You threw me into this abyss to die," Lyra continued. "You called the Keldron monsters and beasts. You were wrong on both counts. Around the Eternal Mandate, ships were falling silent one by one. Engines dead, weapons offline, shields collapsed. The Keldron moved through the fleet like shadows, untouchable and unstoppable. This world is under my protection now," Lyra said. "These people are under my protection. If you want them, you will have to go through me." Kefvaran found his voice. "You are one human. The Concord has 1,000 ships, 1,000,000 soldiers. You cannot win." Lyra smiled, and there was nothing friendly in it. "You made a mistake, Admiral. You threw away a human being because she showed mercy. You thought that made her weak. You did not understand that mercy is a choice, not a limitation. I chose to save the Drethki. I chose to accept the Keldron. And now I choose to give you a choice." She leaned forward, and her eyes burned. "Leave this system. Tell your Concord that the Wyvern abyss is closed to them forever. Tell them that the dragons remember how to fly among the stars. And tell them that if they ever threaten my people again, human or Keldron, I will come for them. Not with mercy. With fire." Kefvaran wanted to refuse. He wanted to rally his fleet and crush this arrogant human. But his ships were disabled. His weapons were gone. His crews were alive only because the dragons had chosen not to kill them. "You cannot threaten the Concord," he said, but his mental voice was weak. "I am not threatening," Lyra replied. "I am promising. You created me, Admiral. You threw me into the abyss and expected me to disappear. Instead, I made friends with what lived there. I became something new. And now I am giving you a chance that you never gave me." She raised her hand, and 10,000 dragons raised their heads to the sky. "Take your ships and go. Deliver my message. And pray that we never meet again." The retreat was silent and total. The Concord fleet limped away from Charybdis 7 with not a single casualty, but not a single weapon left functioning. They had come to conquer monsters and found instead a queen dot as the last ship disappeared into faster-than-light travel. Lyra felt Velthrix's thoughts wrap around her like wings. "They will return," the matriarch said. "They will bring more ships, more weapons. This is not over." Lyra nodded, watching the empty sky where her enemies had been. "I know. But now they know that we exist. Now they know that we can fight. And now they know that when you throw a human into the abyss, sometimes the abyss throws something back." She turned to face the dragon army that hovered behind her. Thousands of ancient eyes watching their human queen. "Today we showed them our claws. Tomorrow we show them our fire." The dragons roared, and the planet shook with the sound. The reckoning had only begun. The story of Charybdis V spread across the galaxy, like fire in dry grass. Survivors from Kefvaran's fleet told their families. Families told their neighbors. Neighbors told strangers. Within weeks, every inhabited world had heard some version of the tale. A human woman, thrown into the Wyvern abyss to die, had risen again as the queen of dragons. She had defeated the Concord without killing a single soldier. She had done the impossible. For the species living under the Concord's rule, the story meant something more. It meant that the masters of the galaxy were not unbeatable. It meant that even the weakest, even the condemned, could rise again. It meant hope. The Drethki were the first to respond. The refugees Lyra had saved emerged from their hiding place on the remote moon. They sent a message to Charybdis 7, asking if the stories were true. When Lyra answered, they wept with joy. The woman who had sacrificed everything to save them was alive, More importantly, she was powerful. They came to the Wyvern Abyss in their damaged ship, expecting to find a military base or a fortress. Instead, they found a human woman standing on a landing pad carved from volcanic rock, with a dragon the size of a mountain curled behind her. Lyra welcomed them with open arms and gave them a home in the crystal caves. The Drethki were only the beginning. Other species followed. The Ven, whose homeworld had been stripped of resources by Concord mining operations. The Galax, whose culture had been erased and replaced with Concord-approved beliefs. The Thren, whose leaders had been executed for demanding better treatment of their workers. They came in small ships and large ones, in family groups and entire refugee fleets. Lyra welcomed them all. The Keldrin watched this strange gathering with curiosity. For 10,000 years, they had hidden from the galaxy, convinced that other species would only bring destruction. But Lyra showed them something different. She showed them people who had been hurt, who had been abandoned, who had been thrown away just like her. She showed them that the galaxy was full of people looking for a place to belong. You see? Lyra said to Valthrix one evening, as they watched a group of Drethki children playing with young Keldrin hatchlings. The Concord does not represent everyone. There are good people out there, people who deserve a chance. The matriarch rumbled thoughtfully. Perhaps we were wrong to hide for so long. Perhaps we gave up too easily. You were protecting your people, Lyra replied. That was never wrong. But now you have a chance to do something more. You can help build something new. News of the growing alliance reached Earth. Humanity had been a minor member of the Galactic Concord, tolerated but not respected. They were too young, too primitive, too emotional. The other species looked down on them as children playing with toys they did not understand. But the story of Lyra Vance changed everything. She was human. She had done what no alien had ever managed. She had made contact with the legendary Draconith and lived. More than lived, she had become their queen. Earth's governments argued for weeks about what to do. Some wanted to distance themselves from the renegade commander. Others wanted to reach out and offer support. The debate raged in every capital, in every parliament, in every home. Then Lyra sent a message. She appeared on every screen on Earth. Her image transmitted across the vast distance of space. She wore her dragon-scale armor, and Valthrix was visible behind her. But her voice was warm and human. People of Earth, she said. I am Lyra Vance. I was born in New Geneva on the shores of Lake Superior. I joined the space service because I believed in exploration and discovery. I was condemned to death because I refused to murder innocent people. She paused, letting her words sink in. The Galactic Concord threw me away. They thought I was weak because I showed mercy. They were wrong. Mercy is not weakness. Compassion is not foolishness. The willingness to help others, even at cost to ourselves, is the greatest strength humanity has ever possessed. Behind her, dragons began to rise into the sky, thousands of them, filling the screen with wings and fire. I am not asking you to go to war. I am asking you to remember who we are. We are the species that crossed oceans in wooden boats. We are the species that walked on the moon. We are the species that looked at the stars and said, we will go there too. We do not give up. We do not surrender. And we do not abandon our own. She raised her hand toward the camera. The Keldrin have accepted me as their queen. They have given me an army of dragons and a world to call home. But I am still human. I will always be human. And I am asking my people to stand with me. Not for conquest. Not for revenge. But for something better. A galaxy where mercy is not a crime. A galaxy where refugees are not murdered. A galaxy where strength is measured by the lives you save, not the lives you take. The message ended, and Earth was silent. Then, slowly, the response began. Not from governments or military leaders, but from ordinary people. Scientists who wanted to study with the Cauldron. Engineers who wanted to help build the new alliance. Doctors, teachers, farmers, builders. They signed up by the thousands, then the millions. They wanted to be part of something new. Humanity had made its choice. 1 year later, Lyra stood on the surface of a moon that orbited Charybdis V. Around her stood representatives of 20 species, all of them refugees from the Concorde's cruelty. Above her, dragons and human starships flew together in formation. The first joint fleet in galactic history. Velthrix landed beside her, and Lyra felt the matriarch's thoughts touch her mind. "The Concorde is gathering its forces," the dragon said. "They are afraid. They know that their time is ending." Lyra nodded. "Let them be afraid. We are not here to destroy them. We are here to show them that there is another way. A better way." She looked out at the gathered crowd, at humans and Drethki and Keldron and a dozen other species standing together. The old galaxy was built on fear and dominion. The new galaxy will be built on hope and cooperation. It will not be easy. We will make mistakes. We will struggle and suffer and sometimes fail. But we will do it together. She raised her voice, and it carried across the moon's thin atmosphere. They threw me into the abyss because they thought it would break me. Instead, it made me stronger. That is the lesson we must teach the galaxy. You cannot destroy hope by casting it into darkness. Hope finds a way. Hope always finds a way. The dragons roared. The crowd cheered. And somewhere across the galaxy, the Concorde trembled. Lyra Vance had been thrown away as worthless. Now she stood at the head of an alliance that would change the stars forever. The Wyvern. Abyss had been meant as her grave. Instead, it had become her throne, and from that throne, a human queen and her dragon family would teach the galaxy what it meant to underestimate humanity. They had tried to bury her. They did not know she was a seed.